Why are people protesting in Canada? What is behind the protests in Canada that has people calling the Prime Minister a dictator? For weeks, Canadian protesters furious over their government's COVID vaccine mandates have launched the Freedom Convoy that has paralyzed Ottawa and key border crossings, encouraged demonstrations across the globe, and rendered political instability into the government of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. On February 17th, the patience of Canadian authorities wore thin and police units launched a wave of arrests, hoping to apprehend protesters and end the gridlock that has continued for weeks. It is high time that these illegal and dangerous activities stop, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on that day. Earlier in that week, the protests, which some considered seemed small and disorganized at first, led Trudeau into declaring Canada's first national public emergency order in half a century. While the acting Ottawa police chief has promised to take back the city, the weeks-long protests so far have raised enormous attention on social media and aroused anti-vaccine anger not just in Canada but around the world. Similar caravans are seen to be holding up traffic on the streets of Belgium, France, New Zealand, and even the quiet country of Finland. Who is pushing the protests? The truckers launched the protests on January 22nd. Activists with different viewpoints have joined anti-government protests, including former police officers and military veterans who have been standing up to Trudeau's vaccine mandates. The group's public leaders have held regular news conferences. Organizers have hired a lawyer to represent them in a class action suit. They have also taken measures to provide food, supplies, and diesel fuel on the front lines of the border crossing. Authorities are describing the fuel transports illegal, but protesters are arguing they are abiding by the law. The People's Party of Canada, despite having no seats in the federal parliament, was present in the Ottawa protesters' ranks. Tamara Lich is one of the key Freedom Convoy organizers in Ottawa. She previously served as an official with the Maverick Party that promotes separate views and calls for Canada's 3 Western Prairie provinces to separate from the rest of the country. Ms. Lich, 47 years old, was among those arrested on Thursday, according to a rally spokeswoman. The Canada Unity Group is another main organizer of the Freedom Convoy. They had published a memorandum of understanding calling for the end of pandemic restrictions. How have the protests progressed? The protests began on January 22nd when convoys of truck drivers left from British Columbia in Western Canada heading to Ottawa to protest new federal regulations requiring truckers crossing into Canada from the United States to be vaccinated against the coronavirus. They reached Ottawa on January 28th and vowed to continue their protests until federal officials rolled back their pandemic restrictions. Mr. Trudeau at first dismissed the protesters as a small fringe minority. In response, the protesters had unpredictable impact and their tactics spread to other Canadian cities, including Toronto, Quebec City, and Calgary. For nearly a week, they blocked the Ambassador Bridge, a route where normally $300 million worth of goods a day pass through, and links the city of Windsor in Ontario to Detroit in the United States. Officials were able to reopen the bridge after obtaining a court order. On February 6, Ottawa's Mayor Jim Watson declared a state of emergency. Why can't authorities clear the protesters? Mr. Trudeau followed the Ottawa mayor by issuing a national public order emergency that officially banned blockades in designated areas such as border crossings and across the entire city of Ottawa. Protesters continuing their stand resulted in the resignation of Ottawa's Chief of Police, Peter Sloly, on February 15th. However, the frustration escalated all the way up to Mr. Trudeau's cabinet. On February 16th, the Ottawa police ordered protesters to leave or face criminal charges. In Alberta, 4 protesters were charged with conspiracy to murder police officers, allegations which they denied. The authorities claimed the protesters planned to respond violently to police efforts to break up a blockade in Coutts, a village in southern Alberta bordering the state of Montana in the U.S. Mr. Trudeau's emergency order allows police units to seize trucks and other vehicles used in the protests. Tow truck operators will be obliged to work with law enforcement agencies or face arrest. Insurance companies will be required to revoke insurance on any vehicles used in the protests, and banks will be able to freeze demonstrators' personal accounts. The declaration needs parliamentary approval within a week. On February 17th, the police began taking action to make arrests in downtown Ottawa. On Friday, police units on horseback moved into the protesters' lines. On February 20th, authorities began erecting a metal fence at the Parliament of Canada in Ottawa, while protests also continued in Calgary. What now? Winter weather conditions can make it complicated for authorities to remove the heavy trucks. Marco Mendicino, the Minister of Public Safety, had earlier warned supporters traveling to Ottawa not to participate, saying they would risk being charged with involvement in a crime. As of this report, there has been no backing down seen from either side of this conflict. This entire crisis has raised eyebrows both inside Canada and across the globe, with many questioning the merit behind Trudeau's vaccine mandate, while wondering how long the protesters can continue their movement. This issue has already cast major doubts on the future of Mr. Trudeau in politics.